when you needed to make an international call was like you had to book an overseas operator and all that stuff, and it was just like,
I remember those
yeah,
days. I remember those
and it never
days.
worked. And it was like
Yeah.
$100 a minute or something crazy.
Yes, I never called my parents when I moved to the US because it's like who could afford it? I couldn't
Yeah,
afford to call them,
yeah.
and they couldn't afford for me to call them. So now you don't think twice.
While we're waiting, I'm just curious, did Israel kind of have this sort of third world landline phone system also for a long time because it was all socially owned, or
Take a year or two to get a landline?
yeah, yeah, was that
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Having a landline was an achievement.
Right, okay.
All right, let's get started. Oops, what did I do?
The radical fundamental principles of freedom, national self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, August 24th. Thanks for joining me. I'm still in beautiful Barcelona, although it is hot, I have to admit. It's a bit of it's hot and humid. It's challenging, but yeah, it is beautiful here, and I still think it's the best food city in the world. Um, all right, let's see. We have our AMA today. We have our panel. We've got Adam, Amlan, and Andrew all with us. Might have some additional people join over time as they wake up. Yeah, here's Ian. So I expect others will join as we progress here. What I'd like is if you guys um, on YouTube can tell me if you can hear the panelists when they ask the questions clearly. Let me know. Um, Adam, why don't you get us started?
Okay, I have a question about Israel. Um, what we're seeing is a government that is clearly acting contrary to the interests um, of the people who elected them. Um, and if you look at the composition of the government, having a finance minister who was twice convicted of felony swindling, um, and a prime minister who is under criminal indictment and has been for decades. Um, why do people choose such politicians, and is it an indicator of something that's deeply wrong in the culture?
Well, I mean, Israel is a parliamentary system that where you get governments that are established through negotiation and these are coalition governments. Uh, Netanyahu has over the last 15, 16, 17 years basically won every election, not in the sense that he's won 50%. He's never won 50%. He wins enough where he is the largest political party, and then he goes out and he forms coalitions with whoever will form a coalition with him. Um, in this case, the finance minister, who I don't know if you're right about his criminal prosecutions, but anyway, the finance minister is a part of a right-wing government, a right-wing political party, religious right-wing political party that was willing to form a coalition with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu needed them in order to form this coalition. I think much worse than them are the ultra-Orthodox Jews that get these massive subsidies from the Israeli government. And those are the coalitions that formed. Netanyahu has enough of a following, it seems, pretty much every election to guarantee him a large enough number of parliamentary seats to be able to form a coalition by putting pieces together. There are a number of political parties now in Israel, and have been for a few years, who refuse to have anything to do with Netanyahu, which means that he becomes more and more desperate every time he forms a government, and he brings in people who are shadier and shadier. But so I don't think in that sense, I don't think Israel is particularly unique in that sense. If you look at the last election in France, and the left and the right, and who got elected, and their inability to form a coalition government because they're all completely splintered. Or if you look at the elections in Germany, I think this is a phenomena of parliamentary elections. It's a phenomena of the West right now. Israel doesn't have a real left, so it just has political parties that won't deal with Netanyahu and political parties that will deal with Netanyahu, and that's how it's splintered. I also think we have to be careful in terms of they're not doing what the Israeli public wants. The Israeli public doesn't know what it wants, never has. And most publics don't know what they want. And the reality is that almost anybody else in Netanyahu's shoes post October 7th would have probably done very similar things. Now, I wish there was somebody who I could say was more forceful and more committed and would have been more aggressive and would have done the right thing. But I'm not convinced that any of them would have. I mean, cowardice is common, and procrastination is common, and fear of America is common. So I don't know that Israel, just like Americans, have a lot of choices in terms of their politicians, into the political parties that involve. The only people who would do kind of the right thing in terms of the war are the right-wing religious nuts, and they would do it for the wrong reasons. So, Israeli politics is problematic. It is a reflection of the culture. The culture's screwed up, right? Just like every other Western country, just like America. Look at the choices we have right now. So I think Israel has as bad of a choices as we do. Maybe slightly better in some cases, but yes, I don't know of any country right now that's healthy culturally and that is picking politicians in a healthy, productive way.
But having gone through Israel on my family's way to America, I'd like to share my late father's impression of Israeli society and the contrast between that and Poland. Somehow in Poland, even under Soviet-imposed communist government, the average person was principled, often with the wrong principles, but the phenomenon of valorization of criminality, where in the case of swindles and cheats, the general attitude in Poland was, the swindler is dishonorable. He's not a person with whom one should deal in any way except at gunpoint. And even then, as soon as the gun is aimed away, you don't trust that person. Now, in Israel, it's the victim of the scam, the victim of the swindle, who is marginalized. There was a word, Freier.
Yeah, but you're dramatically misrepresenting Israeli culture, Adam. This is just not true. Fire means somebody who doesn't stand up for himself, who's somebody who's a sucker, but not for swindle. Nobody in Israel respects swindlers. Netanyahu is respected by a subgroup within Israel that is about the same size as maybe the MAGA Americans. You talk about a swindler, Trump is 3 times the swindler that Netanyahu ever was. And I think you're valorizing Polish society more than it actually is. Israel could not be as successful it is as an entrepreneurial country, as a tech hub, if it was based on swindlers, and if swindlers were the people who got ahead in that society. It's not the Israel I know. And the reality is that a vast majority of Israelis don't like Netanyahu, would vote him out if they could. And a much even larger percentage of Israelis don't like the finance minister and his political party. His political party is very, very, very small. There's almost no, it has almost no backing. Its backing comes from the religious kind of right wingers. And that, but because of the parliamentary system, sometimes very small parties have an outsized influence on the politics of the country. So no, I don't think that is true of Israeli society. It's not true of any of my experience in Israel. Crooks are crooks, just like they are anywhere else, and nobody respects a crook.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that. It is entirely possible that things changed very radically between the time my family was in Israel and the time you were growing up.
It's also possible that your family experienced some unsavory characters within Israel and maybe generalized, but from that, because I'm not sure there's that big of a difference in terms of years between when your family was there and when I was growing up. But Israel was society when I was growing up in the 1960s. Nobody locked their doors. It was a very open, it was a very friendly society. It was not a society of swindlers at all. All right, thanks,
Thank
Adam. Amlan.
Yeah, hi, Yaron. So my question is a relatively minor one, but I'm just curious. We've talked in the past about the role of the military in domestic events, for example, disaster, and we talked about how that's not appropriate. How about just like PR type stuff? So I'm thinking here, for example, you have like the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds in the US. It's an awesome show. It's fun to
Sure,
watch,
sure.
great morale boost, and all that kind of stuff. Are those appropriate things to do, or would that also not be, military demonstrations, parades, where you
Yeah,
show off
yeah,
equipment? I mean, on
yeah.
one hand, you say, okay, the taxpayers are paying for this. You should have some visibility on what it is. It is fun. On the other hand, it's like, okay, it's just a waste of money and taking away focus from, what should be.
I mean,
As I
look,
said, minor question.
it depends on the kind of world we live in,
Yeah,
in the world in which we live today, where, I mean, the government's spending so much of our money on so many things
right.
that it shouldn't, that it needs to stop. It needs to tighten its belt. It needs to stop showing off. It needs to do the kind of basic stuff. And, in a world in which everything's going pretty smoothly and the government has a balanced budget and the economy's growing robustly and we're all doing well. If they want to fly the Blue Angels or on a baseball game, cool. You could view it as the Blue Angels practicing formation flying or whatever. I just think you have to take into account the fact that, and in a completely laissez-faire free market where people are basically voluntarily paying taxes, if you want to call it taxes, paying for the military,
Mhm.
and they have a surplus and they can afford to do this and they can maybe fit it into training somehow, then sure, why not? It's marginal. But we live in a world where anything they can cut, I'm for cutting. Even if it's anything that's not essential for the defense of the United States or just essential for policing, basically, I think they should cut, and I would include kind of Blue Angel demonstration type things.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Andrew.
Hey, you're up. Um, I'm listening to Ayn Rand's Art of Fiction course on the ARI YouTube channel, which I think is brilliant. And as she's talking about the importance of selectivity in choosing what to present in your fiction, according to the theme, according to what you want to convey in the scene, it sparked the memory in me of when I was aspired to be a fiction writer as a child, and I was trying to write descriptive paragraphs of like, a room or a setting or whatever, and I thought I had to present everything, and it seemed wrong to me to not present everything. And now, like hearing her talk about romanticism, how wrong that attitude was, and um, I was just thinking, like, that would have been revolutionary to me in terms of like attempting to write fiction.
Yep.
Those principles that you talked about. And it just became drudgery. Like it's drudgery to present everything in a room if you're, so it brought me also to like think the question, like, what do you think are some basic ways that objectivism in the culture would benefit children? And I know that that's a big question, but like, it seems like if these principles were formally taught to, when you're really so developing in such a rapid way and an open way as a child, that it would be revolutionary.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are many ways, whether it's great children's books, phenomenal children's education. I mean, think about the quality of education today, how awful it is, and kind of how much upside there is in early childhood all the way to college education. I don't think we've even scraped the surface in terms of what is possible. The encouraging of children to be valuers, the encouraging of children to be idealistic, to worship heroes. I mean, the psychological benefits of that are huge. So I think there are lots of different ways in which the objectivism as a cultural phenomena would be helpful for children in really in every realm. Good TV, good movies, just good role models, of course, good role models, and really a childhood of surrounded by ambition and by romanticism and really the key, a great education. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine, and I don't think objectivists have a real appreciation for this. It's hard to imagine how different the world would be in terms of the sense of life, in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of the just life and how we lived it, and how much better it would be. I think we lack. I really do think we lack the imagination to be able to even project that into the future, to even imagine it.
What do you think is like in terms of the epistemological influences? I mean, I had such confusion, I think, epistemologically as a child because, and how do you think the society? I mean, I don't think society's. Well, how do you think society does epistemologically with teaching children?
Well, the obvious way is through education. I mean, they'd actually get an epistemologically correct education, which would shape everything, in terms of for them. But beyond that, I think education is being modeled. I mean, epistemology is modeled everywhere. It's modeled in the way their parents behave, the way their parents respond. I mean, think about all the kids who ask why, and some parents, sadly, who kind of, oh, shut up, stop asking why questions, and maybe even slap them to stop it, view it as a nuisance, right? Instead of this incredible act of discovery that the child is going through. I mean, there's a million little things in which, as parents, as just people in the environment, and certainly as teachers, we are constantly engaged in modeling good epistemology or bad epistemology to the kids, and encouraging them to be thinkers and independent thinkers, or encouraging them just to shut up and do what they're told. So it's everywhere. It's the good epistemology would be everywhere, and again, it would be completely life-changing for the people involved.
Yeah, and it's ironic that
in that
objectivism
culture.
is accused of being anti-children when like children would be great beneficiaries of objectivism.
Yeah, it's stupid in so many different ways, right? Because Ayn Rand didn't have children because children make a very small appearance, and Atlas Shrugged somehow we're against children, which is it's just a dumb criticism. It's just somebody not thinking, and usually repeating what they've heard by other people making the same criticism.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Ian.
Hey, Yaron. Just a quick thing on what you just said, that someone online pointed out that Ayn Rand is a quintessential J.D. Vance cat lady, childless cat lady, right? She was held into cats, loved cats, and had no
Yeah, but
children.
he hates the left, and he's not the left.
Yeah. So my real first question. So I was thinking a little bit based on some things Alex O'Connor said about morality, and so in the Rand way of thinking about things, it really starts with life and the idea of life as the standard of value. And if you choose life, then everything else follows. You know, rationality, the virtues, all of that comes out of the choice of life.
Mhm.
But the initial choice itself is not a moral choice in that sense. There's no moral standard to apply to it. It's because it's before that.
Yep.
Now, could you think of that in relation to David Hume's is ought problem and say that he is right in the sense that there is no ought in choosing life? It is a choice you have to make in order to have an ought of any kind. And so it's kind of before that. And in a sense, he's right in that way, but he's wrong about the rest of morality.
I don't know what value there is in saying he's right about that, because that's not the issue in the end of the day. The issue is, is there an ought in morality? And if, and the fact that he can't recognize that morality only starts once the choice is made for life, that's a major flaw for him. So I'm not sure there's a value in saying, yes, okay, he's right. There's no ought that requires one to live. That is true. But morality doesn't apply anyway. So, and if there is oughts really don't apply. Oughts generally don't apply until you live, right? So until you choose life. If you don't choose life, then there are no oughts. And the rest of us better protect ourselves from the people who don't choose life, because they have no oughts.
The way I was thinking about it was more as a way to bridge the gap with people that have bought into the is ought thing and say to them, okay, well, but what about once you've made that choice, then do the rest of these things follow? And if you can get them to acknowledge that, maybe over time they will start to understand, okay, this does affect how I want to live my life.
Yes, I do think that's true. I do think you have to make that point, that morality only starts at the point of choosing life. And once you choose life, then the question is, okay, what does it require? And once you choose life, all these oughts suddenly come into being, because of the nature of man and the nature of reality. I think that's right. Whether that helps convince them that you bridge the Izod gap, or that is consistent with Hume or whatever, I don't know. I haven't had any success with these more philosophical types of ever being able to for them to. I've never seen one of them go, huh, never thought of that. That's interesting. Maybe I should read Ayn Rand. Maybe I should look at this more carefully. I've never seen that response from any of them. I wish I did. Did that not come up in O'Connor's debate?
So Alex O'Connor brought it up kind of first thing, very not in those terms, but the very similar idea. And then Craig Biddle launched into something that I couldn't follow, and I stopped watching. He did not. Yeah, it wasn't a good presentation from my point of view, but I didn't watch all of it. I have to admit, I got bored. And
no, I mean, with somebody like Alex O'Connor, who's clearly very intellectual and very well read, and has thought about this. Yeah, the is art issue is one you have to deal with, and you have to deal with clearly for the audience that might be following O'Connor. That's why you're doing the debate. So it's a crucial issue you have to address, and you have to address it in pretty clear terms. But yeah, there is no morality until you choose life. But once you choose life, life necessitates it.
Yaron, should you ought to choose life absent like highly extenuating circumstances?
But what does it mean that you ought to choose life? I mean, by what standard?
Pleasure, pain.
What's that?
Pleasure, pain.
I mean, death is neither pleasure nor pain. So there is no standard. You could say that animals, generally biological beings choose life, but they don't choose. They don't have free will. And one of the things that makes human beings unique is we do choose life. Although there are examples, I guess people always bring this up, of animals committing suicide. I don't quite understand how that works, but there is no anything outside of your choice by which to be the standard of that. Now, it's unthinkable not to choose life. Right? I think Leonard at some point in one of the lectures says, yeah, it's not understandable to choose non-life or to choose death. It's not, but there's no biological or compulsion. There's no external standard by which you can. Life is the standard, but life to be the standard has to first be chosen. If you choose no life, it's a primary choice. And yeah, I don't know how pleasure pain would fit into that, right? Plenty of situations where people are in pain. You have to project it to the future. You have to project what's possible. You have to project all these things, but that also requires life. It requires a certain perspective on life. And it's not like you have to choose life. I mean, in a sense, you have to choose life every day. But it's not that, there is this morality doesn't apply to me today because I'm choosing death today, but tomorrow I might choose life. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Once you choose life, that's the path you're on, and morality is binding. You can choose to end your life, but then it requires you ending your life, and then morality doesn't apply to you because you ended your life. I think all that is right. We can.
Thanks, Yaron.
Then we have a philosopher here. We can ask him. Thanks, Ian. Robert.
Yeah, regarding philosophy in action, philosophy in practice. I mean, I hope folks are really capitalizing on your art shows and your rules for life shows, and that's kind of my interest. And I don't think you can do philosophy without it. I always come back to Ayn Rand said that art is the indispensable medium for the communication of a moral ideal. But on the light side, I'm wondering, are there books, especially light reading, which stood out for you or stand out for you that made you think life should be more like this? I know you mentioned like Heinlein, for example, I thought was great in that regard, where you read his books, you get lost in them. They're not real heavy, but you think, man, I wish more people were like that. I wish life was more like that. Do you have any books that stand out for you that besides Heinlein that give you that feeling of, this is because on the heavy side we have Hugo and Rostand and Dumas.
Yeah.
Well, Dumas is a little lighter.
Dumas lighter, and then
Stand out for
there's
you.
people like Sabatini. Sabatini, is that right? That was his name. He's fun. Like Captain something. A lot of pirates in his novel, in his books, and they were fun, and I enjoy those. But look, there's lots of really good books. Most of them in the genre of kind of action movies, action novels. I always like Tom Clancy. The Bourne trilogy or whatever was always that was really cool. These really accomplished men of action is those are always fun to read. What else? Yeah, I think that's the genre in which you see heroes and action, science fiction, of course. I enjoyed Terry Goodkind's fantasy novels, and my guess is that I could get into a good fantasy novel, and I'm sure there are good fantasy novels out there. Robert Heinlein mixed kind of a friendly philosophy, right, with to objectivism, with fun and with adventure. I don't know what I think of Robert Heinlein if I read him today. I read him in my 20s and loved it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure he ages well. I try to read. I read The Moon as a Harsh Mistress again a few years ago, and it just wasn't the same. It wasn't as good as when I read it in my 20s. It actually lacked the romantic element. It wasn't really romantic. It really had no plot. That was the real problem with it. It had no plot, but it was so new and innovative when I first read it. It was so exciting when I first read it that it didn't matter to me. But then when I read it again, it's like, nothing really happens. It's just these characters, thinking aloud. A little bit happens, but very little in an entire novel. Very little actually happens in Moon as a Harsh Mistress, as much as I love the book or loved the book. So yes, I'd say I'm sure there's other science fiction I've read over the years that I really liked. Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say it's really interesting you mentioned that because, yeah, Heinlein was so outrageous, when I first read him, late 70s, early 80s. And now I think, I don't think people realize how shocking Atlas Shrugged was in 1957. We're so used to, people, ideas about romance and sexuality, and it was scandalous at the time. And now that's the least interesting part of, the Fountainhead even. And
true, and that's probably
having
true.
affairs.
Probably true of sexuality in Robert Heinlein's novels. I mean, the man, what is it? The
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Stranger in a Strange Land was his first novel where he brought in his ideas about sex. I think it was the first novel. Before that, most of his books were more like teenage adventure stories. I can't remember the name of the stories, but The Man Who Bought the Moon. I think there was a story like that. Man Who Bought the Moon. I mean, there's some Have Space Suit, Will Travel. Those were all fun. And then he comes out with Stranger in a Strange Land, and then his whole Lazarus series of books, which are Time I Left for Love, I think was actually my favorite. Time I Left for Love, where the hero never dies; he lives forever. And all his adventures, and most of them have a lot of sex involved in them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were short on plot too. The vignettes had plots, but the overall story was just Heinlein writing the way he wanted to write.
Yes.
But yeah, it's so easy to forget how
Yeah.
outrageous nowadays the kids also, oh, I'm into polyamory, I'm into non-monogamy.
Yeah, in
They
those
don't even
days,
understand.
If
it
I could
was
just
pretty
add
outrageous.
something on that though,
Yeah.
Heinlein was a huge influence on me,
Yeah.
and I think it started me down the road of eventually finding objectivism,
Yeah.
and because it was so different, and the basically the capable people and the free, the freedom to do things that they chose to do that didn't hurt anybody else was kind of the underlying morality, and those two things were very appealing. So
Yeah, no, I agree.
yeah.
I loved his books, and I discovered Ayn Rand before. I read his books.
Okay.
I
Okay.
read his books. I read Ayn Rand when I was 16. I read Henline probably in my 20s.
Hmm.
But still loved them, and they were a lot of fun. And yes,
Yeah.
looking back, they don't really have plots, most of them. But the vignettes are fun, the stories are fun, and Henline is just telling stories that he's interested
Yeah.
in, and he's building characters that he likes, and his characters are heroic, and they are principled, and they're interesting,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Excellent. Yeah, I've never read Clancy, haven't read Good Kind. Those are a few good suggestions I'll look into. Thank you.
Yeah, good kind. Between he wrote a series called The Sword of Truth, I think,
Hmm.
and between book 5 and book 6, he read Atlas Shrugged, and
Ah,
you can tell. Book 6 has a number of Francisco and Gold-like speeches in it, and it's very inspired. But you can tell he's ready for that. Even in book 5, there's already elements of kind of him reading objectivism. But by book 6, he's definitely read Atlas Shrugged. And then he's got some Kantian characters there because he's influenced. So it depends on your tolerance for these kind of things. But it's all in the realm of fantasy. So you have to juggle magic with everything else. But I enjoyed them when I read them, which was maybe 10 years ago. Yep.
excellent. Thank you.
Sure. And Clancy's just one of the many kind of novelists that writes about spies and kind of action and which are a lot of fun. And I'm sure there are dozens of others. Other novelists, Leon Uris was always fun and really interesting and challenging. Um, I'm sure there are others. Um, yeah, so there's a ton of good books out there. Leonard Peikoff used to read these little, mystery novels, and he used to go through dozens of them. I mean, he just read them and he loved it. He used to buy them in secondhand bookstores. He used to come home with 20 of them and just read them all. Or he'd read the first paragraph. I think he could tell within reading the first paragraph about whether he'd like it or not. So he would, and so yeah. So there's a lot of kind of popular fiction that is enjoyable. A lot.
It's one of the things that made me think of the question. At the end of Certainty and Happiness, he's in the Q&A. They ask him about his hobbies. He says, and if I have any time left, I read fiction, but
Yeah.
that's not important because it's cheap fiction, which is about all I have the strength for by the
Yeah.
time I'm ready to relax. And I got a kick out of that, but it made me think about exactly these kinds of books.
Yep. But yeah, absolutely. And his house was always filled with them. There were piles of it everywhere. All right, let's take a super chat question. Graham asks, "What's your thought on a career in the military from an objectivist perspective? Is it moral or not?" I mean, certainly a career in the military is a legitimate career. It's a moral career if it is chosen rationally and taking into account everything that's going on in the world around us, including kind of what is happening in the military today, and whether this is consistent with a healthy life. And I have a lot of qualms about it. I could not recommend to anybody to go serve in the military, even though I'm a believer that we need a military and somebody needs to serve. But the reality is that going into the military today today puts you at the command, if you will, of people who are fundamentally irrational, people who are guided by philosophical and moral principles that do not place your interest as a primary, rules of engagement that are basically, sacrifice you, your life, your interests to the life and interests of the enemy. I don't think soldiers in the American army in particular are respected. I talked to Marines coming back from Iraq who described having basically going into battle with their hands tied and blindfolds on. I'm talking about the rules of engagement that were placed. How could you imagine putting yourself in that situation, putting yourself in a combat situation where your commanders literally don't care about your life? They don't have your safety as a primary. They care more about the life of an Iraqi civilian than they do about your life. So these are, the military's become anti-life for the people in the military. And as such, I find it very difficult to recommend a military life, a military career to anybody. If you're not going to be in combat or you think you can change things, but by the time you change things, you'd have to be a general, or you'd have to be at West Point, or you'd have to be, what happens in the meantime while you're a soldier on the ground? Now, I don't think it's quite as bad as Russia, where they literally treat their troops as, as cannon fodder. Just send them into battle ill-equipped. At least the American army trains and they do whatever they can to protect you, and they give you the equipment and they give you the training and they give all that. But then the exact opposite of the Russian army, they value the enemy civilians more than they value you, and that I find horrific. So on the one hand, I think it's a very noble profession. Fighting for freedom, fighting for America is still America is still a free country, and it is a noble thing to do. But on the other hand, given how soldiers are treated in the American army because of the rules of engagement, I just think it's crazy. Which is unbelievably sad. Unbelievably sad. I don't know if that helped, Graham. Monotropic. So-called price gougers earn the extra profit they gain during an emergency, or are they merely recipients of a fortunate windfall? Well, it's a combination of both, right? And certainly you could imagine it being both. They might have increased inventory because in preparation of a potential catastrophe, they might be able to open their stores and keep them open when others cannot. So some of it might certainly be an issue of their direct causal action. Some of it might be, a windfall. They happen to be in the right place at the right time. But even then, they have to be able to manage an inventory. They have to figure out what the right price is. They have to be willing to supply it to the people. They have to be able to restock. So I don't think it's ever just a complete windfall, although I guess you could imagine situations where it is. But certainly that profit can be maximized through effort and through thought and through planning. Either way, I think it's moral. All right, let's go back to our panel. Adam.
What is your evaluation of Ukraine's strategy, including, since they are not able to hold the line in the Donbass, getting some Russian territory to exchange whenever the war comes to a close?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have all the intelligence that they have. I think if they can hold that land without committing too many troops to it, without sacrificing land somewhere else, certainly I think that is gives them an advantage when it comes to negotiations one day. Who knows when those will happen, if they ever happen. Could they have deployed these troops to take back some Ukrainian land somewhere else? Maybe not, given the defenses that the Russians have built on their territory on the territory they've taken from the Ukrainians, as we saw when the Ukrainians tried to make inroads in the south. They came across the minefields and the trenches and all of that, and couldn't really move forward very far. Could the Ukrainians have invaded Russia in a way that would have allowed them to outflank and maybe block the resupplying of the troops fighting in Donetsk, which is what I thought initially they were going to do, was swing south and kind of cut off the supply chains. But I don't have the intelligence to know why they chose this particular province. You know, you've also got two incursions of the Russians into the Kharkiv area, where they have they've taken small pieces of Ukrainian territory, but pose a potential threat towards Kharkiv. Why not flank them? Why not go behind them, surround them, and kill them off? I mean, I'm sure the Ukrainians have a reason for that. But the reality is that, right now it looks like a brilliant move. Partially because Putin is panicking, you can tell. The Russians don't know exactly how to deal with it. They're gaining a lot of prisoners of war, which they'll later swap for their own people. If they can hold the territory, they'll have something to negotiate against the Russians in order to get some of their territory back. And they're just putting the Russians in a position of panic and stress, which is a good thing. I am worried about the losses they're taking in Donetsk and whether those can be reversed, and whether at what point does that become a flood? At what point can the Russians really take large quantities of land? Right now, they're taking inch by inch by inch by inch very slowly. So these are 6,000 troops. Is this the best possible way to deploy them? I don't know. And I assume the Ukrainians have a lot more intelligence and know a lot more about what's going on than I do. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say yes. And it seems right now like a good move, but we will see. And I don't know what the alternatives are again. So in that sense, I'm ignorant. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Amlan.
So just following up on the question that was just asked around, is it moral to serve in the military today? In a proper society, would it be, as a corrective measure, perhaps partially, would it be proper to say that soldiers could decline to participate in military action or a war? So not only do they volunteer to join the military, but they volunteer to join specific actions. Now, maybe, you want to have a carve out for heat of battle type stuff or emergency attacks or things like that. You don't want to make, you do want your military to be able to respond and not have big votes and discussions. But, okay, we're going to launch a war in Iraq or whatever. And people that say, well, hold on, I either don't like the way this is being conducted, I don't like the idea of the war or whatever, and I've just declined to go. Is that legitimate, or you join, and you go with
it? I think you join. I think it's you sign a contract. You don't get to, I don't think the contract makes any sense if the contract says, when you want to do stuff, okay, when you don't want to do stuff, that's fine too. You get to choose on a case-by-case basis. You couldn't run a business that way. You couldn't run, I guess you could quit and they might be consequences, contractual consequences to quitting, just like there are in any other contract, work contract. But I don't think that it's I'm going to hire you into my company, but you can choose what assignments you do and what assignments you don't, right? I can't plan. I can't, that doesn't work. Of course, you could quit again, but then you quit. It's not that you're still there to do something else. You're not pulling a paycheck while you're not signing. Now, exactly how you would do that in the military, I think you would have to have, because of the kind of training it requires, you would have to have some set amount of time that people were committing to, no matter what. And then, yeah, they could continue, they could quit. But if they continue, they'd have to do it, they would have to engage in whatever their commanding officers required them to engage in.
Okay. Because even in civilian work, and again, like this is so polluted by the way that our society runs, but let's say I'm a pilot and my boss says you have to fly this flight and the weather is dangerous. There's a judgment call to be made. And now a pilot, okay, you're in charge of that flight, and ultimately it should be your decision whether or not you're flying it. So maybe the parallel isn't exact, but there is still cases where you can push back and say, hey, or this is a dangerous situation I'm going in, I don't have the right equipment, and I refuse to do it. Now, whether or not there's consequences, I guess the court has to decide. But could not some parallel like that be used? Like, hey, you guys who are running this war are a bunch of idiots, and the rules of engagement are crazy. I'll go back to your example.
Sure.
And I just simply refuse to put my life at risk for that because you're not letting me fight this war the way it should be fought.
Yeah, and any good army would have provisions for that, right?
Okay.
So any good army would have provisions for soldiers saying, no, this is stupid, I'm not doing it.
Okay.
And they might have to justify that. They might have to be court-martialed or whatever and defend their actions. But yes, a good army is an army where basically soldiers are committed to following every order that they receive.
Every lawful order.
Yeah, even if it's viewed as lawful, they should be able to have room for pushback. Now, again, in the heat of battle, maybe not. But the Israeli army is known for pushback from people, of people pushing back and saying, no, it's a bad plan. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Let's rethink this. And I think it's what makes the army a stronger army.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I agree. All right. No, that's interesting. I mean, as you say, it's one of those things I think that has to be thought through carefully and figured out.
Yeah, and I think you'd have different contracts in different armies, maybe, and you'd experiment a little bit with what it looks like to have a truly volunteer army.
And even in a branch of service, it could be different. I mean, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Andrew? Have we lost Andrew?
He's muted.
Andrew, you're muted.
Well, he could be gone too, but he's
I'm
muted.
unmuted.
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I have no question at the moment.
Okay, that's fine. Ian.
So, in objectivist circles for a long time, it's been pretty common to say, okay, well, economics, we know what works in economics, and we really need to make the moral argument, which, is fundamentally true. It's baseline a moral argument. But at the same time, we seem to have lost the economics part as well. Like the level of economic illiteracy seems to have gotten worse. And there are no longer free market economists of the stature of people like Milton Friedman or Hayek or people like that are in the public eye that are talking free market ideals. And it seems to be having, like, you can't even get to the moral argument anymore because they don't even accept that it works, right? So it's like you've got to back up one step. And I don't know where to go from there, but I just wanted to bring up that point that like we used to have the point that, okay, well, everybody understands because of Milton Friedman and these people that, okay, capitalism works, but kids today don't understand how capitalism works. So
I don't
you have
think
to,
they ever understood the capitalism works, but it is true that there was a period where you had Rand and Friedman and maybe Hayek and Mises was still around. We had these geniuses. You had these larger than life figures in the field of economics and Ayn Rand. And you don't have that anymore. You have people in economics who are good and they're out there and they're active and they're doing their thing, but they're not Milton Friedman and they don't have the kind of popular appeal that a Milton Friedman had. PBS is not doing shows based on their books. It's just not out there. And I don't know why that is. I don't know what makes a Milton Friedman a Milton Friedman. I don't know how much of that is the culture around him, how much of that is his choices. But yeah, we lack that. We don't have a Hayek, we don't have a Mises, we don't have geniuses in economics. We have a lot of good economists, but they're good. And maybe they've been doing breakthrough work, but they don't have the charisma and they don't have the public outreach that they used to have. And I'm not sure what you do with that. I agree with you. That's just a fact. It's a fact that we have to live with. And to the extent that we can elevate the good economists that exist out there and promote their work, I think it's worthwhile doing. It's why I talk a lot about John Cochrane or about Scott Lincicome, who's not technically an economist, who are trying to get the better ideas out there. The Austrian school has more adherence to them, but half of them are whack jobs who are complete nutty anarchists who nobody takes seriously and who are, at the very margins of society. And a lot of them are, in their own way, very academic and deal with your own students and deal with the universities and don't have a public face. The only guy I know who really has a public face out there in economics is Tyler Cowen, right? It's Tyler Cowen, who's good, but he's flawed because he's too accommodating of the statists. He's too willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But the reality is that there's nobody out there. There's no economist out there who's made it into the mainstream, free market economist who is writing and who is visible in the mainstream. They're still talking to each other. The libertarians are talking to each other. They're talking to their own students, and I think for the most part, the students that the reality is that the number of students interested in these ideas is shrinking. It's not growing. And look, I say this as somebody on the margins. I'm not pretending that I am in the mainstream. I'm far from the mainstream. I'm on the margins as well. What
do you base that on, Yaron?
What's that?
Like, what do you base that on? That the students are decreasing for free market economics?
I look at the amount of activism there is among, call them libertarian student groups on campuses. It's shrunk dramatically over the last 10 years. And it's being replaced by a kind of MAGA. This is, I think, part of the effect of Trump. Part of the effect of Trump is to suck the energy out of kind of the free market elements, the passion of young people, the idealism of young people around free markets is being sucked into national conservatism and Christian conservatism. I mean, Charlie Cook is a good example of it. He used to be very interested in free markets. Now he's a just disgusting, horrible, a Christian conservative. And that was true. I gave the example a few months ago of that being true in Brazil. I think Bolsonaro sucked the energy out of the kind of the free market movement in Brazil. a lot of young people, a lot of passion, a lot of interest, and it's a lot less today than it was 10 years ago, pre Bolsonaro. I think Bolsonaro and Trump sucked it out. Now it could be the Milei has the opposite effect, but we will see. It's going to be interesting to see. He's certainly a fascinating character, and his impact on young people is really, really interesting because he encourages them to read free market economics. He encourages them to engage with the great economists. I mean, that's a big part of his agenda. He's not the kind of populist I think these others are. It's going to be super interesting. Super interesting to see what exactly happens. I don't know. John says, do I believe MAGA swallowed Austrians in the UK and Canada? Yeah, there's no question. The movement in the UK fragmented around this kind of national conservative type attitude. Christian national conservatism is on the rise in the UK. I think Brexit and reform and all that again sucked a lot of energy out of the Austrians in the UK. I see a lot less interest in Austrian economics among students, among young people in the UK than I did 10 years ago. I think the trends are going against us, that going against free markets, not just, I don't know about Canada. I have no insight into Canada. But the UK, I spend a lot of time in the UK. I speak a lot in the UK. I interact with a lot of young people in the UK. Young people are just not attracted to the ideas the way they used to be. And they're not attracted to the ideas because the competing ideas involving kind of a national conservative movement, they find more attractive. So while there's still as many professors as there used to be, I think, even that might not be true. Even some of those might have gone. And you can see that in the American Libertarian Party, right? How many of them used to be focused on free market economics, used to make that a big focus of theirs, and now they become these paleo libertarians. They're more focused about building, stopping immigrants and building walls and dealing with social issues. So
it's a huge influence in Canada too.
Yeah. So I think that MAGA, call it MAGA, I think the better term is internationally is national conservatism, conservative religious conservatism, nationalist conservatism is growing much faster than and it's taking away from the energy that used to be behind the free market movement. And that's sad. That is incredibly sad. And they're not Austrian anymore. I mean, the Austrian economics is out the window. There's almost no discussion, debate that I see actively engaged in. I mean, I follow the Austrian economists on Twitter and other places, and they're still trying, but their following is much, much smaller than I think it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So one quick follow-up that I just thought of, that one crazy idea is that one of the reasons that people don't believe that capitalism works anymore is actually the decline in serious Marxists, because Marx believed in capitalism as a thing that worked. He just thought it was terrible. And real Marxists understand that capitalism delivers the goods. They just don't think people should have goods. So
I think that's right.
And we've got like a faux Marxist thing now, which took some of the color of it, but didn't take the core ideas.
I think
at least in economics.
Yeah, I think that's right. But it's true even 20, 30 years ago that Marxists were not very Marxist in the sense that they hated capitalism, because the reality is that Marx is wrong. And they have to deal with that, right? Marxists have to deal with the fact that Marx, who predicted that capitalism was just a phase and the capitalism would morph into socialism, that would be they kind of gave up on his attitude towards capitalism. The Marxists gave up on that, and the neo-Marxists kind of gave up on the whole idea that there was anything good about capitalism. They rejected that about Marx partially because they saw that Marx had been wrong in terms of his prediction. All right, let's see, Robert.
You're on?
Yeah, Andrew.
I thought of a question,
Okay.
which is related.
Okay.
So I'm just going to jump in front of Robert. Can you just explain philosophically, like explicit? I have an implicit sense of this, but I just want to make it more explicit. Like philosophically, why do you think the conservatives have abandoned economic freedom in favor of concentrating on social issues?
Why they've abandoned?
Yeah, philosophically, like how do you explain that?
Oh, because they never gave up on the altruism. That is the altruism. I mean, Ayn Rand predicted this. She saw it coming. She knew it had to happen. They never gave up on the altruism. They never gave up on their collectivism. They never gave up on their religion. And as a consequence, they had to become more statist. Ultimately, morality and philosophical ideas are going to shape what your economic viewpoint is going to be. And the conservative movement just couldn't hold on to whatever elements of advocacy of free markets that they had because they were too committed to Christianity and to altruism and to mysticism and to emotionalism, and those are all incompatible with capitalism. Again, it's people's attitude towards economics are ultimately going to be shaped by their philosophical foundations. Now, you can be a Christian libertarian, but you're an exception. And people who are consistently Christian and a culture that is Christian will never be capitalist.
And on the other side, why are they so passionate about the social issues?
Well, because that's their collectivism and their altruism, right? I mean, they're passionate about the things that, the unit of measurement is family, and state. Those are the two units of measurement, family and state. And the social issues are what they view as attacking or a challenge to the family. The cat lady comment of J.D. Vance. Women are not having kids. Oh my God, that's the end of the world. And because that's the end of families. And religion is driving them towards this view of abortion, and it's all compatible with the kind of the Christian collectivism. That is what drives them. And they're not, they were never, the conservatives were never individualists. And they were never, and as such, were never really advocates of freedom.
Got it.
And you see it, you see it on my chat. People cannot abandon their collectivism. They cannot abandon. They have a hard time because of abandoning collectivism. And the fundamental unit in our society is not the family. The fundamental unit in our society is the individual. And some individuals choose to associate with other individuals in order to form families, and some don't. And there's no moral claim that one is better than the other. That is absurd and ridiculous. And the conservatives have never acknowledged that the fundamental unit in society is the individual. And the fundamental evil of both left and right, the thing that makes both left and right, the left and conservatives, bad, is the rejection of the individual, the rejection of individualism, both politically and morally. Robert.
Yeah, well, I'm glad Andrew jumped in because I have a related question. The speeches at the Democratic National Conference, they were so well written despite the content. And they were so well delivered. It was embarrassing, afterward to watch Trump's usual shtick. And I'm thinking it's a good sign that so many of the speeches included explicit calls for freedom and liberty. And, even though half the time the words were used in the FDR, for freedom's sense, freedom of speech and freedom from want, very mixed. But I think there's two good things there. They're using the words, which plants the idea in folks' minds that freedom matters. And in a few areas, they really mean freedom, reproductive freedom, for example, that
Yeah.
they will have to at least to some degree, live up to invoking those words. So do you take it as a good sign, or at least a good thing that they are invoking freedom and liberty? Or is it wholly parasitical and lies?
It's problematic in the sense that if people start associating them with freedom and liberty, and then they do what they do, which is antagonistic to freedom and liberty, then the words stop meaning anything, right? But the fact that they think that they need to appeal to that is still a value for Americans is a good sign. And notice that the Republicans don't do that anymore. The conservatives have given up on freedom and liberty. Those are now values for them anymore. But yeah, I mean, the thing you got from the Democratic convention is, look, the Democrats are smarter than the Republicans generally. I mean, that's just a general fact. They're smarter than Republicans. They're smoother, they're better coached, they deliver better, they're more thoughtful. I mean, Trump is a moron. I mean, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, he really is, and he is uncouth and undisciplined and can't think and can't follow a thought. He's all over the place, and the Democrats are just they're better at that. Now they're horrible in terms of their policies. I mean, Kamala Harris, the stuff that she believes in, the stuff that she holds is just horrible and despicable, and it's going to be a disaster for this country. But that's the situation we put ourselves in. We've got two options, both of which are unbelievably destructive to the country, and one is better spoken than the other one. Doesn't make it better, but both are bad. Both are really, really bad, and both are really, really destructive. But yes, the fact that they need to appeal to freedom and liberty is a good sign regarding America. They at least believe that Americans care about freedom and liberty. I hope they're right, and I hope Americans call them on it when it's relevant.
Well, that'll be a bright side I'll be holding on to just in case Kamala wins. I've got a bad feeling that come this fall, one of these two is going to win.
I think that's a pretty solid feeling you have there. That makes a lot of sense.
It's ridiculous because it's a terrible feeling, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
All right, thank you for that.
It certainly looks right now that Kamala is going to win, but it could change tomorrow, and Trump wins, and it could go either way. It's likely to be close, but it's likely to be close, and it's likely to be another bad move in the progression of bad moves in American history. It's just I just don't see anything good coming out of this election. I hope, and this is, it worries me right now with all the success and energy that Kamala is pushing. I hope that if Kamala wins, Republicans can hold the Senate or can win the Senate. The numbers suggest they should be able to, but it's the stupid party, so anything is possible. They could very well lose the Senate and the House, and Kamala comes in with her agenda, with the House and the Senate backing her. That would be really, really, really disastrous.
Yeah, my hope is Kamala's not going to be much worse than Biden was if she wins, and that Trump is not going to be much worse than he was the previous 4 years he was in office. That's a slim hope, but that's what I'm holding on to, whichever way it goes.
It's better. Yeah, why not? Your hopes don't matter in reality, so why not hope?
Well, I don't think Kamala's bright enough to be much worse than Biden. And I don't think Trump's bright enough to be much worse than Trump.
I
So
think there's a
there you
good
go.
chance that Republicans hold the Senate, and as a consequence, she can't get much done. I also think that in foreign policy, there's a good chance that since she doesn't believe in anything, I don't think she believes in anything, she will be swayed by money and by the advisors around them, um, uh, to do the necessary things. That she not abandon Israel and not do some of the stupid things that I think she might do otherwise, but we will see. Oh God, the people in the chat are entertaining. All right.
Yeah, we've got people in the chat who are talking about good families, good parents, and they want to vote for Trump. A serial
Yes.
philanderer,
Yes.
worse character even than Bill Clinton, who we criticized for being a
Yes.
sleeping around, and they want Trump.
Yes, Trump is a
Pro-family. Tell
family,
me pro.
Trump is a good family man. He's got great character. He's somebody that his children should emulate everywhere around the world. It's just unbelievable to me where
You
people like
couldn't
John in the
fiction,
chat,
nobody would believe it.
yeah, just can even conceive of these things. And just to be clear, I have a family. I'm a big believer in families. I just believe it's a choice, and it's not a. And if you choose not to have a family, that is not immoral. That is not bad. That is not wrong. It's one option that you have. Do it well. And if you have a family, do that well. But don't judge people based on whether they have a family or not. Judge them about the nature of their character. And I cannot think of anybody worse who's ever run for president, never mind actually achieved the presidency, with a worse character, worse moral character than Donald Trump.
No.
Oh God. All right. Thank God I do not have a son like Barron. Pickaxing on Europa. My colleagues dislike you. Oh my God, why did they dislike me? Because of your partial anti-vaccine stance. Well, on mRNA vaccines. I have a partial anti-vaccine stance? When did that happen? When did I develop such a stance that's partially anti-vaccine? I enjoy you, though, Yaron. I find you wondrously complicated. Why not invite someone from the NIH to speak on vaccines? On what do I disagree with the NIH on vaccines on? I'm really curious on here, right? I can't win. I cannot win on this show. Like I'm attacked from the whole group of people who think the vaccines are killing us, and you're defending vaccines. How dare you? And now I'm being attacked, and I'm disliked by colleagues of pickaxing on Europa for not being pro-vaccines enough. I love mRNA vaccines. I mean, I have a whole section for my next show on all the wonderful things that people are doing with mRNA vaccines and about to do, and how mRNA vaccines are potentially revolutionizing cancer treatment and medicine. I don't know where you get my anti-vax stance. Pickaxing, please find the quote where I'm anti-vax. What did I say, that I didn't think children should be vaxxed? I mean, I'm willing to debate the science there. But I don't get it. I don't get it. Children vaxxed for COVID, not, I'm all pro childhood vaccines and other things. So I just think you're confusing me with somebody else. I will have to email you a link with a reference from a colleague. All right, email me the link, because I have no idea where I ever said anything that's anti-vax. I'm vaxxed, boosted once, I think only once. I don't get boosts because COVID is not that bad anymore. But I did say that I didn't think young people need to be vaccinated. I did say that, and I don't know where the science is that suggests that I'm wrong on that. All right, Adam.
Yes. Recalling that you're a finance guy, I want to share a mistake that I made. And the mistake was not moving my Roth IRAs when I retired to an investment account where I would be free to invest in specific companies. Now, thanks to reading the preprints in the scientific literature, I made significant capital gains on 2 companies because I understood the technology that they were developing, and I knew it would be very useful, and they would go up. And what I failed to do was use the Roth IRA funds rather than the pre-tax money that's in regular investment accounts. And now I'm facing a large tax bill for capital gains. So in case my mistakes may come useful to somebody else, as soon as you can, move your Roth IRA to an investment account where you are completely free to invest in single companies as well as funds and so on.
Well, I mean, I'll say this. So Roth IRAs, for those of you who don't know, are IRA accounts where you pay taxes on the money before it goes into the account. You pay your normal income tax that you would on earnings. But once the money is in the account, all the capital gains that accrue are tax-free. So you can withdraw money from the IRA account on a tax-free basis. So if you've got a bunch of accounts, what you want is to have those assets that are going to appreciate the most, or you expect to appreciate the most, where you expect to have the majority of your capital gains. You want those to be in the Roth IRA because those won't be taxed in the future. I generally do not recommend investing in individual stocks. Now, I understand that Adam is an expert in certain areas and does the research and so on, and he doesn't do it with a large percentage of his portfolio. He does it with some money, but generally, most people I know who invest in single companies lose, don't do well. And in that case, if you're going to lose money, you don't want it in your Roth account. You want it in your other account because then you can take the tax write-off for the capital loss that you have. So, but you can put your Roth account into the certain financial institutions that allow you to have a Roth account where you have a lot of flexibility in what you invest in, including single company stock. Most Roth accounts, you're limited to investing in like mutual funds. So that's, I think, what Adam is referring to in terms of put your Roth account, if you're going to make investment in individual stocks, put your Roth account into an institution that allows you to make investment in individual companies, not just in mutual funds. All right, thanks, Adam. Amlan.
So you've talked about that there, how can I put it? You said there's still indicators that there's some positive sense of life in the West and in Americans in particular, maybe more, let's say, Americans. Does the popularity of shows like Bosch and Reacher, I don't know if you've seen either of them, but they both have heroes who have a strong moral center. They're strong, they're very capable and and all those things. Does that indicate some of that, or is it just because people see things going so bad in so many ways that maybe those shows are popular? Like what do shows like that have strong moral characters that indicate something, heroes basically?
Yeah, I mean, it means there's some elements that still exist, but notice that I at least I haven't seen Bosch, I've
Yeah.
seen Reacher, and I found Reacher pretty boring. I badly acted and pretty boring. I didn't
Super
find it
violent.
particularly good. What's that?
He said super violent.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's violent, but it's this big muscular guy, right, who plays Reacher. And it just I don't think he's a particularly good actor, and I just don't find it that interesting. But yes, I mean, there's an element of that, but you can find in almost every culture there's a certain percentage of people that look for heroes and are willing to support heroes. It's the fact that things like Breaking Bad are as popular as they are, or
Mm.
that really cynical shows going back to the I don't know, The Simpsons and a lot of the animated for kids and but what else is out there? Well, we don't really have network TV anymore that everybody's watching the same show. We have such a fragmented TV market, you can find whatever you want. But there's so much of the cynicism. So many of the shows are cynical shows. So yes, we still have some heroes, uncompromising heroes. It's usually pretty shallow. And the more sophisticated shows, the deeper shows, the more interesting shows are terrible philosophically and a sense of life. Wow. So I worry about that. But yeah, I mean, if we didn't have anything that suggested heroism, that would be worse, right? It would definitely be a bad indicator.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Thanks.
Even the superhero movies, as much as I don't like them, as much as I think that they are shallow and silly and too altruistic often, they too suggest that people are eager for some kind of form of heroism, right?
Right.
But it just needs to be super. It can't be human heroism. It has to be super heroism. Yeah.
Why do they always have to be miserable emotionally?
Well, because the good is always miserable, right? Because altruism demands that, right? If you are happy, that means you're self-interested.
Well, I have a counterexample to that, which is the books of Jonathan Kellerman, where the hero is a psychologist. He uses his intellect a lot, and he lives a very happy life.
Good.
And the one thing to avoid, of course, is his son, Jesse Kellerman, who is awful. I don't know how it happened that Jonathan Kellerman, who is such a great hero, has a son who is, for all practical purposes, a nihilist.
Yeah, no, there are good authors out there. There is good stuff being created out there. They're counterexamples, but the dominant thread in the culture is one of cynicism and one that perceives the good as necessarily being suffering and being miserable and being unhappy and being divorced and all of that stuff. So
Yeah, I would push back on that though. Again, whatever view you have of the acting and stuff, I would say shows like Reacher and Bosch, the heroes are not miserable. Like
okay.
they're happy in their way of living. It may not
Yep.
be the way of living everybody chooses, but I'm not sure that that's completely true. Even in the superhero movies, I mean, somebody like Tony Stark, is he miserable? It doesn't give me that
No, but
impression. Yeah.
But Spider-Man is very miserable. Batman is very miserable,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Tony Stark is the exception in the rule, and he's a cynic, and it's not like
Yes.
he's happy. He's a real cynic. He doesn't. He's not really. Once in a while, he has an idealistic burst, and he does something really great, and the rest of the time, he's just not doing anything really. That value oriented. He's this weird character because on the one hand, he's incredibly innovative and builds all this stuff and is, a genius. On the other hand, he's this presented as the cynical, I don't know if you could actually have a human being that has all those traits. But sure, there are exceptions again, but I'm saying just as a cultural trend, the trend tends to be that the heroes are miserable, that the good guys are bad guys, are not happy. And there are
Okay.
exceptions to that. And there are exceptions to that. And that's good that there are exceptions, but you know, it would be a much drearier world if there weren't exceptions.
Fair enough. All right. Thanks.
All right, let's see. Ian.
So the big news yesterday, of course, was RFK Jr. dropping out and endorsing Donald Trump, which is, I don't know how many more hilarious twists this election can have. But I thought afterwards it was interesting to see that, like, who came out and was very positive about this thing. There was a lot of stuff like Peter Boghossian, Dave Rubin, Brett Weinstein. I guess you could expect Weinstein because he's also anti-vaccine, like RFK Jr. But it was so sad to see these people who pride themselves on being heterodox and different, just being unthinking. Like I'm in the camp, okay, I'm happily going to actually vote for Kamala because I want Trump defeated. Like, I don't care what her policies are. I want Trump out.
Yeah.
But if RFK was the other alternative, I might actually say I'm not going to vote. Like, he's so bad.
Oh, yeah.
And it's unbelievable to see these people praising him just because has a different point of view and now he's pro-Trump. It's crazy.
It's really all driven by COVID and vaccines.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, Dave Rubin is anti-vax. And as you said, Brett Weinstein was and is very much, and Brett Weinstein has become a all in on all kinds of conspiracy theories. And I do not understand the appeal of RFK. I mean, he is a rabid leftist when it comes to so many crucial issues. His environmentalism is horrific. It's dangerous. And he is, of course, a believer in multiple conspiracy theories all over the place. He's just one of the most irrational people in our politics. And for somebody and for people to celebrate the fact that he endorsed Trump, yeah, I'm with you completely. And RFK would never get my vote. Trump would never get my vote. So the only options I would have if I was voting was to either vote for Kamala or not to vote at all. I very well might not vote at all, primarily because I realize my vote doesn't matter, and why put myself through the emotional stress of actually voting for somebody I hate like Kamala. So I probably would just sit it out. But it truly is sickening that this is the state of American politics, as this is a state of some of its more, what you used to be, appear to be more rational commentators, but it turns out they're not. Turns out they're not.
And RFK Jr. might be in Trump's cabinet now. Like if you're a serious Trump supporter, like I know there are people like Andrew Bernstein, people who are serious Trump supporters. How can you listen to that and go, okay, yeah, this guy's thinking the way I think people should be thinking.
I think that's just perfect. If Trump wins, I hope RFK is head of Health and Human Services. I mean, let's just get it over with. Let's go all out, zombie, nutty, crazy, and let's because that's what they were floating. They were floating him becoming head of Health and Human Services.
Or CIA. Somebody said he should be the head of the CIA.
There you go. Yeah. And then we can have parasites eat everybody's brain. That's the world in which we live.
Is conspiracism a symptom of mental disorder?
No, I don't think so. I think conspiracism is a symptom of shallow, emotionalistic thinking. So look, the biggest conspiracy ever is religion, right? There's this God, and he manages everything. He is the ultimate elders of Zion, right? and he runs the whole show. And so people need explanations as reason, as you know, what do you call it? Respect for reason and trust in reason fades, and ability to reason fades. People look for other kinds of explanations for things. Conspiracy theories, the thing that they do is they explain things. They explain things in simplistic, emotionally appealing to a certain percentage of the population ways. And I think that's why they're popular. And as reason declines, as respect for reason declines, conspiracy theories will become more prevalent.
Yeah, conspiracism is a form of magical thinking, and magical thinking is one of the default ways humans think when they haven't been given a proper methodology.
And it used to be, I remember I spoke about this, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. It used to be that the culture that was most susceptible to conspiracy theories was the Muslim world, was Arab culture. Daniel Pipes has a whole book about conspiracy theories in the Arab world and how susceptible they are to multiple conspiracy theories. And again, it's because it's a mystical, emotion-based, zero respect for reason culture, and guided by the ultimate conspiracy theory of religion, and then they have to break it down for explanations for particular things. And then what you have with America is, starting with 9/11, we start seeing America become susceptible to conspiracy theories. And that, I think, is an indication of how far we have sunk in terms of, again, respect for reason and abandoning reason and embracing emotion and faith.
But don't you think, Yaron, that conspiracy theories also are connected with a paranoid way of thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's all connected, right? So it's fear. It's driven by fear. Isn't religion the same way? I mean, there's a sense in which religion is the same way. There's some fear, and it goes back to the need to explain, and the fact that you're facing this world, this reality, and you have no explanations for what's going on, and that has to induce fear, right? So it's all connected. It's all related to one another. As reason declines, fear will increase. Religion will increase. Conspiracy theories will increase. They all go hand in hand. Collectivism will increase because as reason declines, individualism necessarily declines. Reason is an attribute of individuals. And as reason declines, individualism declines, collectivism increases, tribalism increases. It's all one package deal. All right, Andrew.
How do you get around the bad grocery stores in Puerto Rico?
You eat at restaurants. And you find whatever you can find. You do what you can. But you mostly eat at restaurants. That's what we do. Restaurants find great food because there are lots of good farms and lots of good produce if you know where to look. And the chefs know where to get it.
So how do you not put on weight?
What's that?
How do you not put on weight then?
No, you eat smarter restaurants. You don't go to restaurants that are selling, I don't know, fried and high carb, and you just figure out which are the restaurants that are basically selling healthy food, and you moderate how much you eat. We eat out in Puerto Rico 5 times a week, and at a restaurant, and really 6 times a week, 5 to 6 times a week. And no, we're not gaining weight from that.
Do they specialize in Puerto Rico in like certain cuisines? Are they particularly good at any cuisines?
I think a certain combination of Spanish and kind of Caribbean influences. But it's very eclectic. The chefs, the restaurants that we go to are all being trained in some of the best restaurants in the world, in the US and Spain and in France. I mean, they all left Puerto Rico when they were young, went to the US, trained, got experience at restaurants, and then came back home and started their own restaurant. In one case, the chef is a Midwestern guy who's just really, really good. And he married a Puerto Rican, and they moved to Puerto Rico, and he opened a restaurant in Puerto Rico, and he's spectacular, and so, and there's a wide variety and of good food. There's a number of kind of Japanese influenced restaurants in Puerto Rico that are very good, and Japanese food is generally pretty healthy. If you mind your portions and you know you're going to eat out every evening, so you don't eat a lot during the day, it's not that hard to not gain weight. The real challenge is losing weight. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. But gaining weight is not something we're too challenged with. Plus, I work out a lot.
Losing weight is hard. I'm in the process right now. It's very tough.
Yeah, it's you have to go hungry. I mean, there's just no other alternative. You basically have to go hungry, and that's hard for me. And all these people who do fasting, it's like, I can't fast in the morning. If I fast in the morning, I can't think. And if I can't think, I can't work. I can't do anything. So at some point, I have to eat. And that point is always less than 16 hours since I last ate. So I can't do the intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah.
I hated Yom Kippur when I was a kid because I hated the fasting a whole day. And so some of them say, oh, don't fast in the mornings, just once a week, don't eat. It's like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
You know what that does to you? So no, so you just have to cut down on calories and
you're a data guy, right? So I've been using the calorie counting method, and it helps because it kind of forces you to look at what you're eating. So far it's helping, so we'll see how it goes.
I'm a data guy when other people are collecting the data.
Okay.
I'm really, really bad about collecting my own data.
There you go.
I don't think I could actually go through the calorie counting stuff. Plus, when you eat out, it's very difficult.
It is very tough,
because you don't know what's in the sauce.
No.
You don't know what's in the food.
Yeah.
I'm just, if I can keep my weight and not gain, and I think if we just cut down portions or just one less piece of food during the day. I just find ways to keep it, if I'm gaining weight, to keep it. But if I wanted to lose 10 pounds tomorrow, that's hard.
Yeah.
That is really hard.
I've got a deadline for a medical procedure. I have to lose a certain amount of weight. Okay. So this is my only way to do it.
I know, I get it.
After that, I want to do more your approach, like reach a target and then just kind of, okay, I'm starting to gain. Let's cut back a bit.
I'd almost rather run an extra 10, run another 10K than calorie count, right? But what happens when you work out more is that you'll end up being more hungry.
Exactly. Exactly. You still have to calorie count.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's do some of these super chats and then call it a day. Monotropic. Given the difficulties in predicting future market prices, how would you determine whether someone earns their profits or receives a windfall? I think you can only do it after the fact. It's very hard to do ex ante, and it doesn't matter. That is, I don't think it should matter whether you receive a windfall or whether you've earned, in a sense of put in the work directly. Windfall is there's nothing immoral or wrong, and it's you still have to put yourself in a position to get the windfall. That is, you still have to have a business, and you have to be open, and you have to be selling, and you have to be. So the windfall is earned. I don't care if it's a windfall or it's quote earned. I consider the windfall earned as well, but earned through any specific effort. If you're lucky, if you win the lottery and you get money, great, good for you, fine. I mean, it's more personally for you as the person gaining it, how much credit do you give yourself? How realistic are you about giving yourself credit for what you've achieved? If you won the lottery, you don't get much credit, and therefore it doesn't boost your self-esteem, and the money is less meaningful. And I think if in business you just get lucky, it's less meaningful than if it wasn't just luck. It was through something specific, some strategy, some effort that you made that got you the profit. But in terms of a moral evaluation, it's great either way. Economic evaluation, a political evaluation, it doesn't matter. Okay. Mervin says, would you consider inviting me to your AMA? I donate $25 a month in super chats, mostly to flirt with my boyfriend. The problem is that a lot of people contribute $25 or more a month on the super chat, and it would be just too difficult for me to keep track of everybody. I could just do it on the honor system, true, but it's just too difficult. I'd love to have you on the super chat, on the live chat, on the live shows, but yeah, I mean, there are many people who only give through the super chat who give a lot of money every month, and they just don't get the same perks as the people giving monthly because they can't keep track of the super chat and who they are and what they're doing. It's just from an administrative perspective too difficult. Maybe one day YouTube will give me the ability to actually pull out by person how much super chat each person is given, and some mechanism by which I can communicate with you guys and set it up so that everybody's treated in the same way. But that feature is not available to me today. Tana, hi, Yaron. My question is about values. Are values physical items in the world or ideas? For instance, is it an apple is a value, or is it what the apple represents or fulfills is the value? Thanks. I think the apple is a value, but then you have to ask, why is it a value? It's a value because of how it tastes. It's a value because of its nutrition. It's a value because you like apples. So the value isn't in the apple external to you, and the value is not just in the benefit. The value is in the relationship between you, your consciousness, your needs, your life, and the thing out there and its characteristics. So the value is in the apple because of its particular characteristics of taste and nutrition that appeal to you as an individual. And that's why an apple might be a value to me and not a value to you. You might hate apples, or you might prefer something else, right? So, but the value is individual. It's in the interaction between what it does to us and the thing itself, because it's in its nature to do that to me, right? To the particular individual. And by the way, as evaluated by my consciousness, as evaluated by my reason, right? As evaluated by my mind. And if that evaluation doesn't happen, it's not a value to me. Frank, ever see the film Red River in Oklahoma? In Red River, they drive cattle to the beef market in Missouri. In Oklahoma, Curly makes fair trades so he can bid in an auction. Yeah, those are great movies. I love Red River. John Wayne and I think it's a John Ford movie. No, it's not a John Ford movie. I forget who made Red River, but it's a good movie. It makes my lists as some of the best Westerns ever. Oklahoma's fun. It's a musical, and they're both good movies. Wyatt, now that Democrats are claiming to be more for freedom, don't we have to shun them more now to make sure no one is confused about what freedom means? Yeah, I am absolutely for shunning Democrats and shunning Republicans. I'm with you, Wyatt. And by the way, Democrats also always presented it. And what our job is to clarify what freedom is, what liberty is, why the Democrats are not for it, and why Republicans are not for it, and stake our own position about what freedom and liberty really are. I'm not pro-Democrat. Nothing I've said is pro-Democrat. Right? except that they're not Republicans. But the one benefit Republicans have is they're not Democrats, but that's about it. Jonathan Honing says, 2 shows on Objectivism with smart hosts at the same time. We're making progress. Who else is on now? I don't even know. Somebody's on now. Cool. Florida. Thank you, Jonathan. Florida. Nick, is it true churches don't pay taxes? If so, should they? What kind of food did they eat in your 20s? Have you contacted Tick History? It is true that churches don't pay taxes. They are nonprofit entities like 501c3s, and like university foundations and a lot of organizations that don't pay taxes. Should they? Yeah. I mean, nobody should be exempt from taxes in a sense. And everybody should be exempt from taxes, right? So ultimately, everybody should be exempt from taxes. Nikos is on now? Really? Nikos is competing with me. That's not nice. What kind of food did I eat in my 20s? God, I don't even remember. We ate at home. We never ate out. We couldn't afford to eat out in my 20s. Going out was like going to a fast food joint or going to Katz's Deli in Austin or someplace like that. We never went out to eat at restaurants except in very, very, very special occasions. So we ate at home. My wife cooked. I've never cooked, never been able to, never tried really. Yeah, but we never ate out. Eating out was a huge luxury in those days. Huge luxury. Never really started eating out until my mid-30s, right? Into my early to mid-30s, yeah. When I had a little bit of money. Jake Horn, who's your favorite car manufacturer? What's your favorite car you have owned? Cheers. Haven't I got this question? Didn't I get this question like 2 days ago? I thought I got the same question 2 days ago. I don't know who my favorite car manufacturer is. I mean, I love Aston Martins. I think they're the prettiest cars out there and the most beautiful cars. So in that sense, they're my favorite car manufacturer. They manufacture beautiful cars that are supposedly great to drive as well, but I like the way they look. The favorite car I've ever owned, that's easier. But the favorite car I've ever owned was my Audi S5, my two-door Audi S5 with this greenish gray exterior color and red leather inside. And it was just a fun car. It was fast, it was comfortable. It had the combination of fast and comfortable. It was a car you could easily drive in traffic, but you could also just rip it when you wanted to and wherever that happened to be. So that was fun. I've driven a lot of fun cars. I've been in a lot of fun cars. But in terms of what I've owned, that is my favorite car. Thank you, Jake Horn. All right, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Go listen to Nikos. He's on another channel. And I will see you all Monday. No show tomorrow, but Monday. Emlyn, did you want to ask something?
No, just wanted to say thank you and enjoy Barcelona.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.
You too.